Welcome, everyone, to the Special Education Inner Circle podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Witcher, and today we're going to jump into a conversation all about relationships, IEPs, teachers, principals, the nurse, everybody who's involved with an IEP can make a difference. And I have with me Markeisha, who's going to share with you how she got to an IEP table, what her role is at the IEP table now, and her experience with making relationships work. So welcome, Markeisha.
Thank you for having me. I'm Markeisha Hall, and I was a former early childhood special education teacher, and that was my role at the IEP table. I did assessments for the district, and then usually the initial IEPs every other Friday. And in 2018, I adopted our youngest son, and he is on the autism spectrum. So now I'm on both sides of the IEP table.
It's so interesting getting the perspective from all different sides of the table. In fact, I can remember my first IEP experience that I really remember. I'm sure I went to meetings with my mom for my brother. And for those of you that don't know, I have a brother who is 43 who has Down syndrome. And I can remember sitting at, it had to be a transition planning meeting for him in high school. And I was probably about, 16, 17. And they got around to asking my mom, where's Robert going to live and who's going to take care of him and what's going to happen? And my mom said, his sister will take care of all of it. And I can remember sitting at the IEP table like, oh my gosh,
right.
These are all really hard questions that are going on. Right. And now I'm involved in somehow, and they're asking me questions about all of this. And so I sat there as a special needs sibling, and there's going to be some special needs parents that hear that and said, I would never do that. But you know what? Sometimes you just say things in the moment and we're like, we got it as a family. Like, we'll just take care of it. And so I had the family experience first, and then I flipped over to the professional experience, and I had that perspective as a certified special education teacher. So you and I have that in common. We kind of reversed how we started, but we both have both perspectives, which is why this topic is so important, because we know that uncomfortable conversations like what I just mentioned that I experienced when I was the kid at the table as a family member, it happens.
Yes.
And we have to know who's at the table and what's going on. So I'm actually going to let you jump into what it means to have a relationship with the IEP team, because, we don't do standard here. We all know you can send emails, or, you're supposed to check in and you're supposed to do that. So maybe you can share a little bit about your son and how those relationships work for him.
Okay. Well, Joe, I have 4 kids, so I think that it's important because a lot of parents are new parents, not just new to IEPs, but just new parents. So I build relationships right away. From the front desk personnel, the nurse, the coaches, everybody, I want them to know these are my babies and this is our family. And these are the things. And if you see them doing something that they're not supposed to be doing, or something that they're doing well, or they're in distress, here's my number, call me.
Yes.
So, and we had built that relationship with the 3 other kiddos that I have at the school. And Josiah was transitioning from preschool to kindergarten. So we were looking forward to that transition. He was ready to go to the big school. We had actually prepared the school before, because like I said, I believe in relationships. This is Josiah. He's coming to school. These are kind of things. So when we went to go get his books and stuff, everyone's like, oh, hey, Josiah. They knew him already from us previously building that relationship. And then, as everyone knows, Rona happened, and it didn't work out the way that we didn't want.
That just sums up 2020.
Right.
It just didn't work out. Rona happened and it just didn't work out. So here we are in the middle of, the country being in crisis, schools closing left and right, or not opening, or whatever was happening in everybody's area. And you're all excited because you have, child number 4 that is going to do this big transition from preschool to kindergartner. He's made a ton of progress and just made leaps and bounds, into different milestones. I know that from speaking with you before. And so kindergarten was supposed to be a big deal. And so you started to build the relationships, and Like you said, Rona happened. So explain kind of what happened in the fall then.
So, man, I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. Joe had come a very long way. He didn't speak until he was about 4. So he's 6 now. And he had all the services: early intervention, OT, PT, neurologist, ophthalmologist, all the IST. And so kinder was going to be a big deal for him. And we wanted to have him in the least restrictive environment. You know, the teacher comes out of me also, and so I wanted him to be included as much as possible and see how that will work out in a general ed classroom with supports. We didn't know what that would look like, so they wanted to see what that looked like, but we couldn't really get down how they would be observing the kids to evaluate how many hours and things like that he would need. I know we're on a podcast that I just hit my head, like the emoji, you know. And it was rough. He was in the class, his sensory processing, auditory processing. And so sitting in front of the computer for hours, every day for hours was just difficult.
It was too much. It was too much. And, you know, you had worked so hard to make so much progress, and you worked so hard to get everything set up for as smooth as a transition as possible. And the teacher in you knew what to do. The mama in you knew what your son needed in that. And I want everybody who's hearing this, who's, the mom who's like, I don't even know, did I do enough? Did I try enough? But you can know all the things, and you can set up all the things to go right. And sometimes it still just goes wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was set up. We were ready. The team was ready. Since we do have a relationship, then we have like a give and take kind of thing. So they were giving consults for RSP, although I knew as the teacher and what the data says that he needs the RSP, but since they hadn't seen him and we had a few
Explain the acronym, Markeisha.
Oh my goodness. I know, my goodness. Resource specialist. So you can have a resource teacher that would either do a push-in, that means they would go into the general education classroom, or some is pull out and they go to a separate classroom to work on language arts or math or whatever their need is addressed, so they can have adapted work or modifications done to their work. That's what RSP. I know. Thank you.
You're welcome. And you know what? Let me just point out again, like, we're going to do a lot of teaching moments inside of, this, I can tell. And I love that, because I want everybody, again, to hear, like, I've been in the field for over 25 years professionally, but I always ask for clarification of acronyms because I never want to assume. So I could have assumed something like that or similar to that, putting it in context of the story. However, anybody, again, who is listening to this, I don't care if you're a teacher, an admin, a therapist, or a parent, there's a lot of jargon that is flying around the IEP table. And depending on your experience, you may or may not know what that means. Do not ever hesitate to do exactly what I just did. I just stopped Markeisha halfway. Could you just explain that acronym?
Right.
Okay, let's make sure we're on the same page. Cool. Yes. Now keep going.
That's absolutely something that parents should not feel like I don't know. It's just like if I was going into a hospital and they would start talking med terms, I would have no clue. My master's in special education would have no meaning there if they start throwing around acronyms.
I mean, do you remember being a newer, teacher or, evaluator in that, and other people were throwing around acronyms as if you're supposed to know what they are. And then you just kind of stood there nodding your head like, oh, yes.
Yeah, I know what that is.
I'm supposed to be the one who knows all of these. Right. So I don't want to ask right now. I'm telling just ask. We don't do that for ego reasons when we're the professional in that situation, but just ask. So, okay. So we have everything falling apart and we're supposed to be having this gen ed resources with push-in. And then we're in this virtual situation. You're supposed to have support from this resource specialist doing this, and everything was still not coming together.
No, it was hard. His behaviors that we hadn't seen and new behaviors started coming up. So I was like, well, my husband's also a special education teacher. So this was all new. I saw him struggling to figure it all out since it was all thrown at teachers at once. So we wanted to come from a place of understanding and grace. And then at about 6 weeks, my mama heart started beating faster. And I was like, you know what? We're going to need to talk about this, because we were having to, sorry, I get really choked up, because his behaviors, what that would look like is he started to get super, super anxious, way more meltdowns than we hadn't seen since he had come into our home when we got him at 2. Pulling his hair, his little curls, balding because he would be pulling it. It looks like his, I'm just trying to describe so parents out there can understand that I understand what they're talking about when you're seeing this. And then that's why I started to be like, okay, like picking his ears so they bleed, just nervousness, filling with his hands, just all kinds of things. Some were new that he'd never done before, had started to come up during virtual learning. So I called a meeting. I do have relationships with the personnel at the school, but there was new people, as there always is, and they didn't know me and I didn't know them. But I do like to respect everyone's position. And that's what so we started there. We started there with talking about how we could best help him. And we did come at an impasse because they didn't see that. Some of the personnel didn't see it, and they couldn't see it because he's at home with me.
All right, parents, you hear that? You're not the only ones who get that. Well, we're not seeing that. We don't see that need. We don't see this as an issue. Yet here's a mom who is seeing not just behaviors that used to be there and went away, were faded, replaced.
Right.
But now they've reoccurred plus more.
Right.
And everybody's telling you no.
Right. They're like, he looks like he's sitting. And I was like, yeah, because we're sitting next to him. Now, the benefit that we had and that the grace, I guess I want to say that we were extending, is that I was adapting all of his work because it's hard for me not to, right? It's hard for me not to adapt it. So they was getting turned in, and we would sit next to him also. And so that he would attend. And then we got the squishies, which is something that he can use or fidgets, they may call them. They're just little, like little toys or little gadgets that a child can hold in their hands when they are feeling like they're not paying attention, helps them pay attention a little bit more. And so we had all the things, and so they weren't seeing any of the things. And so then I said, well, I'm going to tape him. And what it looks like, because I was at an impasse. They were saying like, he's doing this. He knows these things, which is his ABCs and the numbers. And they didn't see the other side of it because they were paying attention they were doing their thing also.
Yeah. So did you record him while he was in class so they could see what he was doing at the same time?
Right. I did.
I love that.
I did do that. And I made sure not to get the other kids in class. There's a whole another can of worms with that. That could be. So make sure that you are, if that's something that you want to do, talk with your principal about that so they can let the teacher know, and so that they can make the proper precautions, especially out here in California. It's like a 2-party. We're here in California, but it's a 2-party thing. But I made sure just to get him from his perspective, to respect the other kids' privacy that's in the classroom also.
Absolutely.
So with that, it was better. It's not something that I had done before. I don't like to, and I would never post it on social media for him, but it was important for me to show that to them during this season because they weren't able to see it. And that got, some different responses. We didn't agree. I was telling Catherine earlier that My husband had to kick me a couple of times up under the table because sometimes my training goes to the wayside and the mama bear comes out. But that's why it's also important for you to bring somebody with you to the IEP, because it's very emotional. And, you know, as the teacher, you're taught to keep like the emotions out of it. It's data driven. It's what is needed. And on the other side is I'm watching my son do things that he hadn't done in the past and just messing up our whole day. And not just my day, his day. You know, it's
Right.
about him and the things that he was enjoying, and just moments of him just sitting there crying for out of the blue, just doing something that he likes, just start crying. He is verbal, but he's not able to verbalize those types of things. Like, I'm feeling so mad because they didn't call on me in class. He's not able to do those types of things yet. So it was very, very frustrating for him. And they're very frustrating for me, because as moms and dads, because my husband always says, and dads, we don't want to see that. You know, we want to avoid that. And then, but we still have to remember that it is a process. It's a process. And it was my job then to be both and to say, what are we going to do to not be in this situation? Because this situation is not conducive to his learning or to him socially, to his well-being as a whole, not just educationally, you know, because after the Zoom went off, we still had to regulate the rest of his day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you mentioned that this is a process, and that's where these relationships that we're talking about can really be key. So you had all the relationships to set up the situation in the fall that was supposed to go well, and it didn't. Then, even though you had the relationships, they got a bit strained because you're seeing something and they weren't seeing something. And I will tell you, this is where a lot of parents and teachers give up or build a wider gap between them. They let this conflict of, I see it, but you don't, and you won't help, or I can't help, or that's not school related, or there's nothing we can do. It's not our fault. The school isn't open. It's like there's a lot of divide that can happen. So you have the relationships, and then this happens. And that's where I can already hear a lot of our listeners are going to be like, yeah, me too. And then they continue to use that mama bear approach, which I am all about when necessary, but you weren't quite at that threshold that you needed that. And you had somebody there, you had your husband to do a little, I'll say nudge, but kick under the table to help you kind of switch that and get back to the relationship building. So you get the data, you get back on track, you're building the relationships, and just share, you know, what happened next then. So you had, like, who did you have to talk to and how did you make this process? Because I know that when there's relationships involved, the process goes faster. So if you have been ignored in your inbox for 2 weeks and somebody's not getting back to you, it's because you don't have a relationship with them.
Absolutely.
And you have to build that relationship. So tell me, how did the relationship piece help? What might look a little bit different than, like, let's say, a standard advocacy practice of like pushing through a negative situation?
Right. So since I wasn't making as much progress as I would with there, after I took it down a few notches and said that let's stop this meeting so that we can all, you know, regroup. And I reached out to the principal. Because I was able to talk more freely with her. She knew our family extensively, since all of the 3 kids are, well, 2 have graduated from there and 1's still there in the 6th grade. So she was able to understand that while the teacher might have been feeling attacked, that I wasn't attacking her. I made that known. I'm a teacher. I don't want her to feel like that. I just want what Josiah would need to move forward in this virtual learning. And I understand that no one knows what it looks like, but I wanted us to figure it out together, what it was going to look like for him in particular. Not for, I can't do everything for everybody. I want to know what's best for him. So that took the being able to even just reach out to her and talk freely.
And let's talk a little bit specifics for that in the way of how did you reach out to her? What was your what was your initial motive? So we stopped that meeting.
Right.
And this is a strategy that I use a lot, but I don't know exactly how you reached out, because there are ways to, like I said, kind of get on the inside, even if you don't have, 3 other kids that have gone through the school with that. So how did you specifically reach out to that principal?
Well, first I emailed her.
Okay. And can you just highlight like what was the tone of the email? What maybe like a one-liner from the email?
Yep. It was just, dear Mrs. Blank and blank. No. I understand that there's new personnel at the school site. We have been having meetings. We've had 2 meetings in particular during this time. And I just don't feel like we're moving forward. And I would like to have your input, but I also CC the team on there, because I don't want to be going behind their backs, and they have working relationships. I don't want to be like, oh, I'm telling someone else. I CC the whole team, added I'm almost saying it. I added the principal. I don't want to step on anyone. I want to follow the process, but I feel like that you need to take a peeksies and see is there a time this week that me and you can talk on the phone?
Yes. And I love that. So that strategy, that's something that we talk about in the Master IEP Coach mentorship a lot. Mm-hmm. We talk about that if you want the team to work together as a team, you have to communicate as a team. And this was a difficult situation, and you were going to write an email to one person, and you weren't calling anybody out in a negative way. Never would I say, send an email to the entire team and tell everybody, tattle on the speech therapist for not doing a good job. We're not singling anybody out. Mm-hmm. What we're saying is, hey, as a team, this is not working, so I need to talk to you. Right. And you're CCing the team, so they're not like, she's running around trying to get us in trouble. Right. Nope, I'm being as transparent as possible. That is a huge strategy. Yes, so if you're driving in your car and listening to this, my goodness, just remember, the 20-minute mark, you're going to want to go back and say, oh my gosh, she told me to look at the 20-minute mark, and I have to write down this strategy, because it gets you unstuck and it gets conversations moving forward. So, okay. So you email the principal, you CC the team, and you ask her hey, we need to do something to move this along.
Absolutely. Yep. And she gave me a call, and we chatted honestly and openly. And the next day we were on a new path. I like to see data, and we weren't able to get it. We weren't sure. And I'm sure a lot of parents are in this and teachers are in this, well, how do I get data? So we decided as a team what we were going to do for Josiah in particular to get data, and exactly what we were going to take the data on. Since it was going to look different, it's different. It's going to be different for the rest of the year. Out here with his school district, they're not going back. This is the school year. This is what the school year looks like. So we work together on a plan for every 2 weeks to the specific California, the standards, the Common Core standards, what we were going to be working on, so that we could just focus on that, get the data on that every 2 weeks. So then when we come back right after Christmas break, we'll have some more things to discuss on the same page. Because I think that was that's another thing. I don't recommend looking at all the things. You can't do all the things, especially in virtual learning. So my specific thing was his kind of comprehension. We were talking about that earlier, and strengthening that part because he was doing okay with some of the other concepts. Not to grade level standards. I think that's what it is. But my concern was the comprehension and the reading part. So that's what we're focusing on. That's what we're taking the data on, that we can all talk about and say, oh yeah, we are talking about the test that happened on Friday, or what's today, Tuesday, December 15th. We're all talking about the same test. When before we might've been talking about different points and different stories like that. So that's super important for me and for them. Mm-hmm. So we're all on the same, so we could get on the same page. We weren't on the same page.
Can I just say that, again, you just dropped another golden nugget of information there, of insight. Parents and teachers, did you hear that they had to decide as a team that we were not going to measure everything all the time, that we had to prioritize and how to move forward? Right. You are listening to Markeisha, who has the parenting background. She's not a new parent. She's a veteran parent. She's a special education professional. Her husband's a professional in special education. She has so much experience as a mom and a professional, and she can't make it happen at home to measure all the things all the time and address all the areas of need all the time. So if you've been beating yourself up over this because you can't figure out how to fit everything in, you can't. You can't do it. You have to make a priority. And the great thing is once you get something prioritized and you guys start talking about those specific reading tests and the specific comprehension, you're going to nail that as like a habit of what you're looking at. And then you can add another piece on. Those pieces that you're not looking at are not gone forever. It's just not a priority right now.
Right. Exactly. That's perfect. And what helped is we talked about this before, is that the part of the IDEA that says future employment, further education, and independent living. So I started to look at it, although I've known that piece, you specifically brought it out. And I just was like, what is going to help him the most? And I was like, well, math, not only because I don't like math. Forget about math. No. And I was an English major, so that didn't go into it, but it was, well, he can use he learns how to use a phone, he can use the calculator, that's kind of virtual. Comprehension is not just so he can understand the Three Little Pigs or whatever story they're reading in kindergarten. It's when he goes out in the world and he's able to advocate for himself. That was super important. And to do that, you have to understand what someone's asking you, and you have to be able to return that information. He has a deficit in that currently. We need to start working on that now, even though he's 6. If I want it to be something that he's possibly open up all the possibilities for him to be able to do it in the future. And so that's how I came to that was our focus.
I love that. And for those of you that aren't familiar with my obsession over the purpose and findings that are listed in the IDEA law, this is where I'm going to give you my disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just telling you where to look. Mm-hmm. In the purpose and findings of IDEA law, we all know the first part that says that a child is entitled to a free and appropriate public education. Then there's a second part that says to meet their unique needs. Mm-hmm. And then there's the third part of that statement that says it's also to prepare a child for further education, employment, and independent living. And that's where the focus should be. And that focus really flips the perspective a lot of times on which IEP goals are important and not important, because there's 99 things that your son could be working on. And you have to figure out the top priorities. And so often I hear parents and teachers struggle with, like, we're talking about a 6-year-old. Why do I have to look at further education, employment, and independent living? Well, go ask somebody who has a child in special education at age 20, right, that they're getting ready to age out of the system. Mm-hmm. They will tell you, I wish I would have known. Yes. So we're cutting that for you right now. We're telling you. Now, doing that is tough. That is a tough parallel to try and make. But you just gave a great example. You were like, okay, like this reading comprehension is a significant struggle, and it will have a significant impact long-term. Right. So that's how you chose to address that. So I want, again, as you're looking to come into I'm going to even say the next school year. I know we haven't finished this one, but like you said, we're like, this is a school year for the rest of the year. Like we had high hopes for the second half of the school year. And a lot of those are just kind of going out the window. Yeah. So I want you to really think about, like, what are you doing now that's going to have the best long-term impact, and who do you need to connect with to make that happen? Who's the principal that maybe wasn't involved in this conversation who could be involved in the conversation? Or who's the nurse that could help advocate for some medical needs that might need to be taken care of? Or who are the people that can help you get the priorities taken care of?
Absolutely. That's absolutely important. We we decided as a team for him to move to a different style of teaching, and that's been working out for him to bring it to full circle. I don't want to just leave it as the meeting. But I do feel like the main point is that the relationship. I was able to reach out. I felt comfortable to reach out to talk about my son, and it was difficult. Some of the conversations weren't something that, it's not always sunshine and flowers just because we're master IEP coaches, but it doesn't have to be like, I'm going to take you to,
the back alley.
Yeah.
That's what it like. That's how you know I'm from suburbs of Chicago, right. South side suburbs there.
People from in LA.
We would say, some parts of the country, they say, like go take your earrings off and that like
right.
back alley. Like we don't have to go there. And special education, we get that reputation a lot.
Right.
In our community of like, well, I had to do this or they wouldn't have, listened. And, it's a process that requires relationships, that requires team communication. And it doesn't matter if you think you got it all right.
Right.
Things are probably going to go wrong. Yep. In there. So you have a different plan. So somebody's going to, of course, send a message because you left it at, he's in a different type of learning now, like you're in a different path and he's on a different kind of learning. So you just real quick, tell us. So he was sitting at a computer for, you said for like days. Oh, I mean like hours in the day. No, it felt like days. So he was sitting at the computer for days and days and days and lots of issues going on. So now what does his learning program look like?
Well, first we adjusted his class. He is in kinder, so they have AM full day and an AM and a PM. So we took him out a full day and we put him in a PM class. So he doesn't even start till 11 o'clock, which also allowed room because he has speech and OT. Speech and OT. He graduated from PT. So that allowed for those things to happen also. And for him just to start his day, we go for a walk every day to get him a little regulated, ready for, ready to learn. And his other class, they started at like 9 or 8:30, and that was just harder for him. So the relationship came in there because the principal, of course, knows her staff and the team knows the staff. And so when they were saying, well, what's important to me is for him to, I feel like I could work on some of the things at home because I am special education, but I want his social emotional health to be checked in. And he thrives on like a teacher saying like, what did you do over the weekend? And everyone has different teachers. My sister's a teacher and she's not as warm and fuzzy as me. The students still like her, but she tells you this is what it is. She said,
I'll totally confess. I was not the warm and fuzzy teacher.
I'm warm and fuzzy. I'm like, let's do this. What did you guys do? So he's more like, what did you guys do? Kind of that gets him more motivated, noticing like, oh, what kind of shirt do you have? All those little things keeps him interested and interactive. And so just that small move, nothing against the other teacher, of course, we still have a relationship with her also. After everything went out and we switched, I did send her another email just thanking her for being his first kindergarten teacher, that it's hard what we're going in, that it had nothing to do with her. It had to do with me finding out what the best course of action was for Josiah. It wasn't even about me. It's about him. And I think once you tell that to parents and to teachers, if we all focus on them and seeing them for what they're going to be doing in the future, then that helps like bring it down. Like I'm not talking about.
I love that. I love that you wrapped back around and you did a thank you, even though that teacher and that situation didn't work out at the time.
Right.
For that, because again, let's just face it, you never know when you might meet again. The school system has so much turnover, so much flip-flopping of positions, and it wasn't the right fit at the right time.
Right.
But she wasn't necessarily doing anything wrong. She couldn't meet the needs at the time with the resources that she had. And that's going to happen to all teachers at some point in time. And it breaks our heart as teachers because we want to do what's right, even when we're not able to.
Absolutely.
So, Markeisha, will you tell us a little bit about, you have a new podcast that is just, I know she's laughing because I'm excited for this. I didn't tell her that I was going to go ahead and let people know where they can find you, because you can talk all things special ed all day long. However, that's not the purpose of your podcast. Your podcast broadens the scope of the conversation. So I will make sure that everybody gets the contact information in the show notes. I'm assuming we'll make sure that they should just go to your website, because they might want to talk to you too. So they can reach out and talk to you, and I'm sure find links to your podcast at your website, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And your website name is?
It's markeishahall.com.
Okay, so I'll make sure you guys have the spelling of it. It'll be there. So markeishahall.com is where you'll find everything. And what are some of the hot topics that you're going to cover on your podcast?
We are going to be talking about, I call it from diagnosis to daily living, since I am a special needs mom also. So we talk about our diagnosis, our first IEPs, traveling with children with special needs, parenting during COVID is just different. Just emotional health. We're going to have someone talking about that, because that's super important to be able to take care of everything.
Just everything. And if you're a special needs family who likes to travel, or you think you might want to travel, but you get a little nervous about it, or what all the things. And I know that we're sitting, what do we call it? The Rona.
Yeah, the Rona.
It's a damper on some of this, but you know what? There's still ways to, have some adventures. And I know that your family loves adventures with all of the, I'm just going to say all the things that go along with traveling as a special needs family. Yes. And so I can't wait for you to share those pieces. So a couple of things again, guys, I just want you to remember, go to markeishahall.com. Make sure to connect with Markeisha directly. If you'd like to speak to a master IEP coach, Markeisha, or perhaps someone in your area, please go to myiepcoach.com, and you can find a list of active master IEP coaches. And you can also, there's a box there. So if you have questions, and you don't have time to search because you are busy, just drop your name and your question there. We'll get you help at myiepcoach.com. One last resource I'm going to make sure that you have is that these conversations are awesome, but it doesn't give me a chance to interact with you, the listener, at the level that we all like to connect. So I'm going to encourage you to come over to specialedinnercircle.com. It's where we continue the conversation. We meet monthly and talk about all the things that are happening in special education, and you get to connect with Markeisha and other master IEP coaches. You can ask for her by name in there. We'll make sure that you guys get connected. So hop over to Special Ed Inner Circle so you can continue this conversation and get the resources that you need. Parents, teachers, admins, and therapists, you're all welcome. So Markeisha, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, I'm going to go subscribe to your podcast.
Oh, yay.
And I'm going to make sure to leave you a review too. Our listeners don't know that the more that you hop over to, if you hop over to iTunes and leave a review and tap the 5 stars, leave a few words, that actually helps more people find the podcast, which allows us to help more people. So please make sure to subscribe and leave that review so we can help more people. And thanks everybody for being here. We'll see you again soon.